The next section for the final exam review is on minerals and water. First, I'd like to start with the functions of water. And water has many functions, even beyond what's listed here, but the main functions are regulating temperature, moistening tissues, helping the kidneys flush out waste products, and the liver flushing out waste products, protecting the organs and lubricating joints, helping dissolve minerals that are transported in the bloodstream, and then carrying nutrients and oxygen to cells all over the body. Now, the recommended intake is about 13 cups per day for men and 9 cups for women. That doesn't mean you have to drink all of that. As you know from your diet study, that you can actually get a lot of water from your food sources. I would like you to know the definition of water intoxication, and that doesn't occur just by drinking too much water. It's essentially, it's excessive water intake in association with electrolyte loss, and that results in a hyponatremia. So that means too little sodium. So you lose the sodium, replace water, so it causes this imbalance. It's generally associated with endurance races, with individuals who might run a marathon in hot weather, and then they only rehydrate with water and not electrolytes. They have the major minerals and then the trace minerals. And I actually don't care if you know which one's a major one or which one's a minor one, but that's how they're subdivided. What I'm going to do is I picked out a few that I'm going to go over and that I find important. I mean, they're all important, but I find important that you'll be tested on for the final exam. Now, of course, calcium and phosphorus are up on the top of the list. Calcium in particular, because as everybody knows, calcium is important in the maintenance of bone. It is a large portion of our bone structure. And because of that, it's the most abundant mineral in the body. You'll definitely need to know that. But also it has a number of other functions. So we think about the transport of ions and nerve transmission, blood pressure, blood clotting, and even muscle contraction. Calcium's kept in very tight control, so we don't see really high or low levels. Sources of calcium include yogurt, collards, skim milk, and notice how you can have the collards have even up and above and more than the skim milk. But I do want you to know that there are more sources, or you can obtain adequate amount of calcium without eating dairy products. So on to phosphorus. Phosphorus is important in, of course, the maintenance of bone and teeth, part of phospholipids. That's what's shown over here. And as a buffer and release of energy, such as with ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Sources of phosphate include salmon, yogurt, milk, chicken, beef, lentils, and almonds. There are many more sources, but these are some of the top sources. Now, when we think about calcium and phosphate, particularly calcium and low amounts, low intakes, we do think about osteoporosis. We obtain our peak bone mass in between 18 to 30 years of age, and then it goes on a slow decline, much more in women after menopause than in men. And associated with bone growth is going to be an intake, or associated with adequate bone growth and maintenance is adequate intake of fruits and vegetables, vitamin D, either intake or from sunshine, protein, and there's also a negative association with carbonated beverages. And I have a question mark on that because we do know the association with soda, but not necessarily other carbonated beverages. There's this inverse relationship between physical activity and television watching in relationship to bone mineral content. So how much of that calcium and phosphate you actually have in your bones. You definitely have more if you're more physically active. If you watch a lot of television, definitely have less. So the non-modifiable risk factors. So we always think about just getting enough calcium to help for strong bones and prevent osteoporosis. But there are some things that really you can't change. So females are going to have a greater risk. The older you get, there's a greater risk. People with a smaller frame who are Caucasian have a greater risk. If you have a family history of it, then you've inherited that risk. Any personal history of a broken bone increases risk, and then an estrogen deficiency. But as we're talking in this class, the modifiable risk, what you can do about it. So as I just pointed out, physical activity, very important. So inverse relationship between how much activity you do and TV watching as opposed in relationship to bone mineral content. So the more physically active you are, the stronger the bones will be. Poor nutrition, it's not just calcium, it's also vitamin D, it's also protein. And protein actually can increase bone strength. At the same time, way too much protein might have a negative effect in some people. Sodium, too much sodium actually can decrease the strength of bone. Remember, we talked about vitamin K2. It's not listed, but K2 really does help tell calcium where to go. Calcium needs to go to the bones and not sit in the heart. Smoking is going to increase the risk of osteoporosis as well as excessive alcohol use. So this is where I talked about vitamin K a little bit, but calcium, too much calcium and vitamin D have actually been shown to increase the risk of heart disease. And this is still controversial, but this is where K2 comes into play, really telling, with vitamin D being that gatekeeper and K2 being that traffic cop, telling calcium to stay out of the heart and go into the bones. And we're still learning about this, so you're going to see more about this in the future. Again, vitamin D being the gatekeeper and K2 being the traffic cop. So with sodium, potassium, and chloride, these are our electrolytes. And when we really look at sodium being outside of the cell and potassium being inside of the cell and creating this balance in between the cells. If you have too much on one side or the other, the cells shrink or they expand. So that means, and then what I was referring to was a cell integrity as far as the shrinking and expanding. Electrolytes help maintain blood volume and blood pressure, help transport nerve impulses, play a role in nutrient transport, and chloride, it's out here too, it's an anion instead of a cation, but that's part of hydrochloric acid. If you remember, hydrochloric acid is the acid in your stomach that keeps the pH at 2 and will uncoil or denature proteins in the stomach. So sodium sources, we know most people get too much sodium from processed foods. So excess sodium does not cause hypertension, though. It increases the risk. So sobriety sodium sources, I'm not going to go through all these. We went through all these this semester. But remember, mostly your processed foods. Actually, the nuts tend to have less sodium than, say, things like sauces and soups. Potassium, extremely important in fluid and electrolyte balance. Cell integrity, again, remember, it's going to help with that balance of fluid in the cells and in heartbeat. So diets high in potassium really help decrease the risk of hypertension. If you think about it, you have sodium outside the cell and potassium in the cell, and they always need to be in balance. So if we get too few fruits and vegetables, particularly our leafy green vegetables, potassium is going to go down. And if we get too much processed food, and sodium is going to go way up. So what that's going to do is that's going to throw off the whole balance between our cells and our blood volume, and that really does contribute not only to chronic disease in general, but in particular hypertension. So potassium really helps to protect against hypertension. So these are just some sources of potassium. I don't expect you to know all these for the exam. And I'm going to skip over magnesium and go to iron, because I'm just going to cover just a few specific nutrients here. There we go. So the main function. Why is iron so important? Well, it's involved in oxygen transport. Without oxygen, we die. So very important to have our iron. Helps to deliver oxygen to the tissues. It's part of hemoglobin. It's part of the heme. And here's the hemoglobin molecule diagram in the background here. So iron absorption, remember the heme iron is part of animal source. And it can range anywhere from 15 to 35%, whereas non-heme iron is absorbed at 2 to 20%. And non-heme iron occurs in both plant and animal sources, but I like to think of the non-heme iron as non-animal just to separate it and make it a little bit easier. So foods with heme iron, beef, poultry, not eggs. Eggs are actually a pretty poor source. Foods with non-heme iron, spinach, legumes, prunes, potatoes, tofu. Those are all just examples. But what you really need to know here, and what's definitely going to be on the exam, is the factors that increase iron absorption and those that decrease iron absorption. The two main factors that increase iron absorption are MFP factor, meat, fish, and poultry. This is a factor that will increase non-heme iron absorption. And vitamin C. This is a powerful, powerful enhancer of non-heme iron absorption. It actually will end up overriding a lot of the inhibitors that I'm going to go over. So our iron inhibitors, tannins found in tea and coffee, calcium and phosphorus in milk, most dairy products, phytate, so this is found in fiber of legumes and whole grain cereals, and we have phosphitin, so this is a phosphoprotein found in eggs. So iron in eggs really doesn't get absorbed. And I want you to know, be sure that you know all the factors that both increase iron absorption and inhibit iron absorption. So this means they're not getting absorbed. The iron is not getting absorbed into the body. The non-heme iron does not get absorbed as well when it's also consumed with these items. I'm going to skip over that. I'm going to just mention iodine. It's a component of thyroid hormone. Remember, thyroid hormone regulates growth, it regulates development, and then metabolism. It's essentially going to speed everything up, or it's going to, slow everything down. So that's the thyroid hormone. And iodine is an important component of that. Deficiency is common in third world countries, not so much in our country. We have iodine added to our salt. So most people get enough iodine, although we are heading towards a little bit of a low-grade submaximal deficiency that they think. So keep your ears open for more on that. Before the exam, you need to know that deficiency can cause a goiter, cretinism, which is an irreversible physical and mental retardation, breast and stomach cancer, and autism. Sources mostly from iodized salt, and that's for fortification. Otherwise, you're really looking at seaweed, cod, shrimp, tuna, shellfish. You can get in some navy beans, potatoes. It should be in our soil, but it really isn't as much anymore because most of our soils have been depleted. I do want you to know about selenium because it's an antioxidant and it works with vitamin C and vitamin E. So selenium is a mineral, vitamin C and E are vitamins, obviously, and they work together as antioxidants. All right, so this will be the end of our section on water and minerals.